Okay. Hello to the first book launch here on IQBC. I am very honored. Oh my God, sorry. Always my puppy. I'm very honored to have Kody Muncaster here, PhD or Dr. Kody Muncaster. And he will speak about his new. I'm sorry. I have to shortly make a break. I'm only 1 minute. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll just start while Jampa is dealing with their dog. So, hello everyone. So my name is Kody Muncaster, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about my book. So the book that I just released, I don't know if you can see it through the filter. It's called Queer Engaged Buddhism. And we just released that about less than a month ago. And it's available through Sumeru Press. So what I wanted to do with this book was to talk about some of the lack of engagement within Engaged Buddhism with queer and trans issues. And I also wanted to sort of map out what it could look like to increase our understanding of queerness in Buddhism and to galvanize our communities towards activism. So I think what I'll do for the next 15 minutes is I'll talk a little bit about some of the chapters and what to expect, and a little bit about my thinking as I wrote it. So it begins with an introduction to queer studies and engaged Buddhism. So my PhD was in gender and sexuality studies, and one of my master's degrees was in Buddhist studies, and the book is partially based off of my master's thesis. So I'm looking at how we can bridge these two worlds and what we can learn from queer studies that could be applied to Buddhism, and vice versa. So in the introduction, I give a little bit of grounding towards how socially engaged Buddhism developed. And I also talk about different concepts within feminist studies as well. Then in the second chapter, theoretical frameworks for queer engaged Buddhism, I'm looking at queer studies and how can we bring different concepts from queer studies, such as Anne Cveckovich's notion of queer trauma, Sarah Ahmed's notion of queer phenomenology, and Eve Sedgwick's concept of reparative reading, and what can those teach us, and how can we apply those to a Buddhist context. I also look a lot at the work of B. Scherer as well. And then in this chapter, I start introducing practices. So many of the chapters have applied practices. The book is an interesting mix of a little bit of academics made accessible, as well as a mix of stuff about my own experience as a queer and non-binary Buddhist, and some applied practices that are adapted for queer Buddhists. So we have a guided breath meditation, and there's also a meditation within Zen called Silent Illumination, which is a mix of shamatha and vipassana. And I've written out a compassionate silent illumination that is designed to be guided for queer folks, and that's designed to be more inclusive, because we know that a lot of meditations are not written in an inclusive or an accessible way for different folks and different bodies. In Chapter 2, Queer and Trans Buddhist Histories Towards a Queer Buddhist Hermeneutics, I look at queerness within Buddhism broadly. So I discuss how in a past life the Buddha was in a gay relationship with Ananda. I also look at the Pandaka question. Pandaka is this Pali word that is sometimes translated and used against queer people. So I look at what that might mean and some misunderstandings around it. I look a lot at the suttas and sutras and look at traces of queerness, as well as different prohibitions around queerness. And I also look at intersex and trans communities, which I subtitled The Forgotten and Left Behind. So often when we talk about queerness within Buddhism, one of the things that we leave out is the intense discrimination, particularly around intersex communities. So this was something that I really wanted to emphasize with this book, because there are very few books in the world about queerness and Buddhism. And some of those books primarily look at gay and lesbian experiences. So I wanted to really emphasize other experiences as well. And then I also look at contemporary queer issues and the common challenges that are faced among queer Buddhists today across the traditions. And then at the end of that chapter, I have a guided practice in mindful eating as well as mindful walking. Then in chapter 3, non-binary phenomenologies, non-duality, and emptiness, I'm looking at some of the Buddhist concepts that have been used against queer people. So we know that misunderstandings of non-self and emptiness are often used to invalidate queer people. And I look at the complications around this, and I problematize those as well. And then I also look at gender fluidity in the sutras. In particular, for example, I look at the Lotus Sutra and what gender transition looks like in that sutra. Then in chapter 4, trans bodhicitta, trauma, deity yoga, and gender euphoria, I'm really looking at trans realities here and how we can examine transness within a Buddhist context, and how we can understand Buddhist transness through trans studies. So in this chapter, I look a lot at Bishur's notion of metagenderism, this concept which looks at how trans folks may have a deeper knowledge of the emptiness on an ultimate level, on an ultimate level. I'm talking about ultimate reality, not relative reality, the emptiness of gender. So I look at all traditions throughout the book. This chapter looks strongly at Vajrayana as well, and at deity yoga practices where folks often do meditations where they imagine themselves as a bodhisattva of another gender, sometimes as a bodhisattva like Mahakala, also known as Ganpo Maning Nagpo, who is non-binary. And the point of that practice is for people to have a transcendent understanding of gender. And then the practice for this chapter is rainbow loving kindness meditation. Then turning to chapter 5, trans bodhisattvas, queer practices, Kuan Yin, Tonglen, and HIV and AIDS. I look at Kuan Yin, also known as Avalokiteshvara, also known as Chenrezig, depending on what country and tradition you're in. I look at their gender fluidity and what this bodhisattva means for queer communities. I also examine concepts within psychology like post-traumatic growth, and a concept within queer studies called political depression, discontent with our social realities. I look at anti-queer hate in the context of health with HIV and AIDS, COVID-19, and Mpox, previously known as monkeypox. And I also look at Tonglen. We have a practice in this chapter, Rainbow Tonglen Compassion Meditation. And I taught Rainbow Tonglen, I think it was at Rain Bodhi, and that is on YouTube, if you want to look that up as well. So this breathing in suffering and exhaling compassion, and I connect this to Kuan Yin, and I also talk about how this was used heavily during the height of the AIDS pandemic as well. Then I have a chapter, Buddhist Psychotherapy and Spiritual Care for Queer and Trans Communities. So I discuss my experience counseling. I also discuss my own lived experiences as well. I explore a Buddhist approach to grief counseling. I also talk about homophobia within families, intimate partner violence, or domestic violence, sexual abuse, and feminist therapy. So looking at how can we bring in a structural understanding of these issues into our work with communities. And then I also look at different koans that are designed for emotional awareness and ego transformation. This chapter has a meditation for self-compassion for difficult emotions at the end. And then in the last chapter, Precarious Love on Interconnectedness for a Queered and Transformed Engaged Buddhism, I explore queer studies again, and this time I'm looking at this notion of a queer sattva, a trans sattva within the bodhisattva concept. And I encourage folks to reflect on what it might mean to be a queer sattva or a trans sattva, what it might mean to look at social justice from the vantage point of the multiply marginalized, and how we can galvanize our socially engaged communities towards activism, how we can arouse queer bodhicitta, the awakened heart-mind, towards action, and how we can develop emotionally so that we can better support our communities. So that's a walk through the chapters of Queer Engaged Buddhism. It's available through Sumeru Press and wherever fine books are sold. It was recently released. It is available in physical copy, and right now this recording is done November 2025. So depending on when you're watching this YouTube video, it'll probably be available as an ebook as well within the next month or so. Too. So if you prefer reading that way, you certainly can. Research has shown that we remember things significantly better when we read them on paper. My Zen teacher taught me that, and then I found it in cognitive psychology as well. But please, feel free to access it in whatever way is accessible for you. And I hope that you enjoy the book. Thank you, everyone. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.
That is beautiful. I must have it, Kody. I must have the book. May I ask a question?
Sure.
What you said about no, I can't repeat it in the correct words, I think. You were speaking about Mahakala, for example, and that there is non-binary. And you also spoke about, well, somehow an awakening of, trans Buddhas or trans sattvas, and that there is a higher, how do you say that, higher wisdom, maybe in transness, when I understood that right. It came into my mind if there is a link to other cultures like First Nations in Canada or in the US, who have as far as I know 5 different genders. So and they also have the two-spirit as one of these genders. So it seemed to me that there is a similarity. Maybe this question goes too far. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we know that trans people have played a really important role in different indigenous cultures. In some indigenous communities, trans people have traditionally been seen as healers, as teachers, as people with very strong connections to the Great Spirit. And these are really important important things to explore. There was a book, I think it was called Queer Indigenous Studies or something like that, but I can't remember the author's name, who explores that in much greater depth as well.
Any other questions? No? Well, my book is not as enlightened as yours, Kody. Yeah, in spite of that, I'm happy that it came finally out in English. After all these years, it's called in English Identity in Exile, Tibetan Buddhist Nuns and the Network Sakyadhita. And the funny thing is, it came out now in 2025 by Timeless Awareness, published by Timeless Awareness, and you also can get it by Amazon and wherever online. And the funny thing is that it's my dissertation, my PhD, and it was originally published in Germany in 2001, 24 years ago. And what is so strange is that I thought, when I made my fieldwork among Tibetan Buddhist nuns in exile in India, so at the Tibetan border, in Himachal Pradesh, in Nepal, in Ladakh, but especially in Himachal Pradesh at one nunnery where I was, where I was one of them. I just belonged to the nuns. I thought, when I have done my studies and when I have published my book in German, then maybe 3 years, but then we will have the first Gelung Mass, because these nuns are so powerful. And in Mullah Sarvastivada tradition, the nuns still are novice nuns. They are ordained, they have the shaved head, but they only have 36 precepts, the vow of a novice nun. But they don't get their full ordination in the Mullah Sarvastivada tradition. So in the last years, they had to go to Taiwan or Hong Kong to get there the Bhikkhuni ordination with permission of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the Dharmagupta school, because these schools or traditions are like siblings. And they, although it's in the Dharmagupta school, they were allowed to wear the yellow robes, or the maroon robes with the yellow, I don't have the English word. Sorry. The robes of the fully ordained nuns in Tibetan tradition, although they had their they were ordained in Dharmagupta school. Now, what has changed was that we had in 2013 the first Geshe Mass, so the first, well, so-called Tibetan Buddhist female professors. And that is also a point where I write about in this book, because I realized the nuns are debating they learn, they are taught by monks, and they are capable, they are intelligent, and they have the power to become Geshe-ma. But it needed time until 2013 to get the first Geshe-ma degrees. And I thought, hey, when the book is published in 2001, maybe 3 years, and then we have the first Geshe-ma. But it needed time. Now, what is not in the English version is that in 2022 and in November, or in the middle of November 2025, so after the conference, there will be Bhikkhuni ordinations or Gelugma ordinations in Bhutan, so in the Mullah Sarvastivada tradition. What is really fascinating, the thing again is that it is a difficulty because Bhutan doesn't allow many people to come to Bhutan as when you are a tourist. So only a few every year are allowed to come. And so it's a difficulty for those who want to become nuns. And you need money to go from India to Bhutan, or from India to China, to Taiwan or Hong Kong. So it belongs still on donations, on sponsorship. And this strange thing that in 24 years, still this book is up to date, because patriarchal systems are working so slow that capable women, in this case, capable novice nuns, are not allowed to become fully ordained nuns in their own tradition. This is also true, unhappily, for Tibetan Buddhism. His Holiness, well, he encouraged the nuns to go in these different countries and become there ordained. But there is no solution for the structure of Tibetan Buddhism. And especially it seems that the monks of his own tradition, the Gelug tradition, are very reluctant towards women. And so it seems that they were those who better say, no, we are not wanting to have those intelligent women on the same level, so to say. Still, I think there has to be research done. And I know that meanwhile there is research done. When I began my field work in the middle and end of the 80s, and then after my studies at the university, it went on. And I stayed there at the nunneries. There was, well, there were only some few articles. I know one article from Carmel Exitsomo, or one from Janice Willis, Professor Janice Willis, but only some articles. And I was told by German professors, oh, there are no Tibetan nuns, and if there are nuns, well, what should they know? So also German professors were chauvinistic in a way, they were happy in their patriarchal system. And now we have women who try to make new fieldwork, new research, but still, after 24 years, this book is needed, I think. And so I'm happy that it's now available in English for you, because all these years I was asked by English-speaking colleagues that they would like to understand what I wrote in German, but they couldn't. Now they can reread it. Thank you for listening.
And also, I wanted to share that if you want more information about Jampa's work, they're on a podcast that I did. So there's a podcast called Buddhist Studies Footnotes. It's not my podcast, but I'm hosting the gay episodes of it, and Jampa did the first gay episode with me. So that will be released probably soon, I imagine, within the next couple weeks.
Thank you very much, Kody, for making this announcement. I'm very much looking for it, because that was such a pleasure to talk with you. It didn't feel like that we are doing a podcast, but it felt like, yeah, we are sitting in the same room, drinking a cup of tea and having a good time and talking. That was wonderful. You were a brilliant moderator. Well, you are a counselor and a coach and a psychotherapist. You have the patience.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot as well.